All right, one of the things your book wanted to talk about was classifying retailers. And of course, there are three ways that they talked about classifying retailers. One is in terms of form of ownership. A second is in terms of the merchandise that they provide. And the third is the amount of service they provide. So let's just take a little look at this, starting with the form of ownership. Of course, there are things that are individual companies that are called independent retailers. We refer to them sometimes as mom and pop operations. These are individual businesses that run independently of any corporate influence. And so this might be something like Stefano's restaurant across the street from UNLV, or it might be a shoe repair shop, or it might be a small independent golf store like Plaza Golf in Los Angeles. There are obviously corporate chains. All right, these are retailers that are owned by the corporation itself. Some of the McDonald's franchises that you go into are in fact corporate stores owned by the corporation themselves. Apple owns all of their own stores. And then there are contractual systems. Okay, contractual systems include retailer-sponsored cooperatives, things like IGA, and we talked a little bit about that before. Wholesaler-sponsored voluntary chains, and then franchises. And that might be business format franchises or product distribution franchises. And so these are all the different types of forms of ownership you ought to be familiar with. Top 5 franchise in the United States include everything from a Hampton Hotel, which would cost you anywhere between $4 to $13 million to get one of those franchises. You'd have to build a hotel, obviously. To $85,000 or so to start to get a Subway franchise, start your own Subway shop. And so you ought to be familiar with some of the top franchises and understand that this is one way to potentially get into a business as an independent business owner by purchasing and running a franchise. There's also this notion of classifying retail outlets in terms of level of service. Of course, the first one is a self-service. You're all familiar with the red box machines, and another example of self-service is are the examples in ATM machines for the banks. And so you think about self-service. These are operations where you basically do all the service for yourself. If you go to a gas station and you don't ever go inside, you simply pay at the pump with a credit card. In reality, that's self-service. Then there's limited service retail outlets, and these are people like Walmart who and Sam's Club and Costco and Target and stores like this that actually provide you with products and goods and services and a limited number of additional services. For instance, they take your credit cards. They'll help you take your groceries or your purchases to your car, those sorts of things. And then, of course, there are retailers that are full service retailers that do everything from help you make selections to helping you with your purchases to delivering your goods to your home. An example of that, of course, might be someplace like Bloomingdale. The third type of way to classify retail outlets is in terms of merchandise. That is, whether they are goods and services, or another way might be to do this in terms of product lines, like an Apple store. The only merchandise they carry is Apple products. Another way to look at this in terms of merchandise would be a durable or non-durable good or service store. A durable good store might be something like an appliance store. Non-durable, obviously, example that wouldn't be a restaurant. Another way to look at the merchandise, a way to classify retail outlets in terms of merchandise is whether they are a convenience store holding mostly convenience-related items, a specialty goods store, or perhaps a shopping store. Stores vary in terms of breadth and depth of their merchandise lines, and we talked about this before. And it's this idea that there's a number of different product lines and then the number of items in each line. You see here, for instance, we have an example of a men's clothing store. When I was a kid, we used to the major men's clothing store in town was called Paul Corey's Clothing, and Paul carried suits, a limited number of suits. He carried a probably a little bit larger supply of different kinds of ties. carry jackets and overcoats and socks and shirts and other men's clothing items. Okay, those are all have to do with the number of product lines and a number of items within each line, and we spent some time talking about that in our last week. Depth of product line, obviously, you think about the depth of a product line has to do with everything from a specialty outlet to category killers. And your book talks a little bit about those. A category killer is a store that basically tries to stock everything in a particular product category. An example of category killers are people like Fry's or people like Best Buy or stores like that. Those are all called category killers versus a specialty outlet, a store that maybe only deals with televisions, that sort of thing. All right, so a little bit more about merchandise lines, the breadth of a product line. Of course, we have, and it's important to look at the sort of the general version of this. There are general merchandise stores. A good example is a comparison of Dick's Sporting Goods to Golf Galaxy. When you go to Dick's Sporting Goods, they carry golf items at Dick's Sporting Goods. They carry a limited number of clubs, a limited number of shoes, a limited number of golf balls, a limited number of golf-related items. But then they also carry items for baseball and soccer and basketball and lacrosse and working out, and so they carry fitness equipment. They carry stuff for rather obscure sports, and they also carry stuff for things like soccer and football and things like that. Where if you go to Golf Galaxy, their product lines are much narrower. They focus on only golf-related items, but they both serve the golfing public. Okay, and of course, when you think about breadth and depth of product line and product line assortments, you have large assortment stores that are called superstores, like Walmart, and you have small assortment specialty stores like a Tempur-Pedic mattress store that might only have 20 or 30 different items in their store.